There is a reason you stopped scrolling. There is a reason your eyes locked onto these words, even if just for a second longer than usual. You may not understand it yet, but something within you paused, something deeper than thought, deeper than logic. It wasn't random. It wasn't accidental. It was a pull, subtle, quiet, but undeniable. And that pull, it was spiritual. Because lately you've been feeling it, haven't you? That exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. That heaviness that sits in your chest for no clear reason. That strange mix of being tired, but not just physically, tired in your spirit. You wake up, and even before the day begins, something already feels off. You try to push through it. You tell yourself it's just stress, just life, just another phase. But deep down, there's a voice, faint, persistent, whispering that this is something more. And now here you are. Not by coincidence, not by chance, but because June 6th is approaching and your spirit is trying to prepare you before your mind even understands what's happening. Listen closely, because this moment right here, right now, is not casual. It is a divine interruption. You were not meant to keep moving blindly. You were not meant to ignore what your body, your emotions, and your spirit have been trying to tell you for days, maybe even weeks. That fatigue you've been brushing off, it's not just tiredness. It's a signal, a warning, a spiritual alert that something is shifting around you and within you. Have you noticed how things have felt different lately? People feel heavy to be around. Conversations drain you faster than before. Even things you once enjoyed now feel like effort. And the strangest part, you can't fully explain it. That's because what's happening is not entirely visible. There is a shift happening in the unseen, and your spirit is sensitive enough to feel it before it fully arrives. That's why the exhaustion came first. That's why the confusion followed. That's why you've been feeling like pulling back, like isolating, like something inside you is saying, slow down, pay attention, but life kept moving. It'll get expected. And you kept pushing through even when something inside you whispered, pause. Now let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. When was the last time you truly felt at peace? Not distracted, not temporarily okay, but deeply spiritually at peace. It's been a while, hasn't it? And that's exactly why this message had to find you now. Because June 6th is not just another date on the calendar. It is a checkpoint, a moment in time where what you've been ignoring can no longer be ignored. A moment where what has been building silently will begin to reveal itself. And your exhaustion, it is not weakness. It is preparation. Your spirit has been carrying more than your mind can process. It has been sensing pressure, absorbing tension, navigating unseen resistance. And instead of breaking you, it has been trying to slow you down, to wake you up, to get your attention before something bigger unfolds. This is the part most people miss. They think exhaustion means they need to push harder. But sometimes exhaustion is the signal that you need to listen deeper. Because something is coming. Not to harm you, but to test you. Not to destroy you, but to reveal what's been hidden. And if you stay distracted, if you keep ignoring what your spirit is trying to say, you might miss the very thing you've been praying for. That's why you were guided here. That's why this moment feels different. Because right now, something is aligning. Something is calling you to stop, to breathe, to become aware again. You are not just tired. You are being awakened. And this is only the beginning. If this message is already stirring something inside you, don't ignore it. Type "I am aware" in the comments if you feel this shift beginning. Blessing code 606 is now activating around your spirit. You didn't wake up one day and suddenly become this tired. This didn't happen overnight. It built slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, layer by layer, until one day you realized that something inside you just didn't feel the same anymore. And the hardest part is, you've been carrying it without fully being able to explain it to anyone. Because how do you describe a weight that doesn't have a clear shape? How do you explain a heaviness that doesn't come from one single event, but from everything all at once? You've been showing up. You've been doing what you're supposed to do. You've been handling responsibilities, responding to people, managing expectations, and trying to keep everything together on the outside. But on the inside, something has been slowly draining you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently, like a quiet leak that never stops. And the truth is, most of what you're carrying no one else even sees. They don't see the thoughts that keep running in your mind long after the day is over. They don't see the moments where you question yourself, where you replay conversations, where you wonder if you're doing enough, being enough, or moving in the right direction. They don't see the emotional weight of trying to stay strong when you don't always feel strong. They don't see how much energy it takes just to keep going when your spirit feels worn. So you stay silent. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. You convince yourself that everyone goes through this. You push it down, brush it off, and keep moving forward. But the weight doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It settles deeper. It spreads wider. It becomes part of your daily existence until exhaustion starts to feel normal. And that's where you are right now. You've been carrying emotional weight from things you never fully processed. Situations you had to walk away from without closure. Words that stayed with you longer than they should have. Disappointments you didn't give yourself time to heal from. You've been carrying mental pressure from trying to figure everything out, trying to stay ahead, trying to make the right decisions without always having clear answers. And on top of that, you've been carrying spiritual weight. The kind you can't explain logically, but you feel it. The kind that shows up as restlessness, as disconnection, as a sense that something isn't aligned even if everything looks fine on the surface. It's the weight of being pulled in different directions. The weight of sensing that something needs to change, but not fully knowing what or how. You've been holding all of this quietly. And because you've been so used to handling things on your own, you didn't even realize how heavy it had become. You adapted. You adjusted. You kept going. But your spirit never stopped signaling that something was off. That's why the exhaustion reached this point. Because your body can push through. Your mind can push through. But your spirit reaches a moment where it says, enough. Not to break you, but to get your attention. Not to stop you, but to slow you down long enough for you to recognize what you've been carrying. There are moments lately where you felt like withdrawing, like stepping back, like needing space without fully understanding why. That's not weakness. That's not laziness. That's your inner self trying to create distance from the noise, from the pressure, from the constant demand to keep going without pause. But here's what makes this even deeper. Part of your exhaustion is coming from carrying things that were never yours to carry in the first place. You've been absorbing other people's energy, other people's expectations, other people's emotions. You've been trying to keep peace, maintain balance, and avoid conflict, even when it costs you internally. You've been giving more than you've been receiving, pouring into situations that haven't been pouring back into you. And over time, that imbalance creates a quiet depletion. You don't notice it immediately. It doesn't hit all at once. But eventually, your spirit feels it. It feels the lack of restoration. It feels the absence of true rest. It feels the weight of constantly giving without fully replenishing. And now, you're at a point where your exhaustion is no longer something you can ignore. Not because you failed, not because you're weak, but because you've been strong for too long without release. This is the truth most people never say out loud. Strength without restoration leads to burnout. Silence without expression leads to pressure. And carrying everything alone eventually leads to exactly where you are now. But this moment is not here to break you. It's here to reveal to you what you've been carrying so you can finally begin to release it. Because before anything shifts on June 6th, you need to recognize the weight you've been holding. Type "I release the weight" in the comments if you are ready to let go. Blessing code 222 is now surrounding your spirit. What you are feeling right now goes deeper than tiredness, deeper than stress, deeper than anything that can be solved by a good night's sleep or a few days of rest. This exhaustion has a language. It has a meaning. And if you listen closely, it is trying to tell you something your mind has not yet fully understood. Because not all fatigue is physical. Not all heaviness is emotional. Some exhaustion is spiritual. And this is where most people misinterpret what they are going through. They assume they are just overworked. They assume they are just overwhelmed. They assume they just need a break. But what if the tiredness you feel is not just from what you've been doing, but from what has been happening around you and within you on a level you cannot see? Because there are moments in life where your spirit begins to shift before your circumstances do. Moments where something is changing internally, where your awareness is expanding, where your sensitivity to energy, to people, to environments becomes heightened. And when that happens, your spirit starts processing more than it used to. It starts rejecting what no longer aligns. It starts resisting what once felt normal. It starts pulling away from things that drain you, even if you don't consciously understand why. And that process is exhausting. Not because something is wrong with you, but because something is awakening within you. You have entered a phase where your spirit is no longer comfortable staying the same. Where it is beginning to outgrow certain pattern, certain connection, certain way of thinking and living. And that internal shift creates tension. It creates friction between who you have been and who you are becoming. That tension is what you feel as heaviness. That friction is what you feel as exhaustion. Because your spirit is doing work behind the scenes. It is sorting, filtering, and discerning. It is identifying what belongs in your life moving forward and what does not. It is preparing you for a shift that requires a different version of you. And while that preparation is happening, your energy feels drained because you are no longer aligned with the old, but you have not fully stepped into the new. You are in between. And being in between is one of the most exhausting places to be. Because you can't go back to who you were. It no longer feels right. But you also don't fully see where you're going yet. So you exist in this space where everything feels uncertain, where your energy fluctuates, where your motivation rises and falls without clear reason. And this is where spiritual awareness becomes critical. Because if you misunderstand this phase, you will try to force yourself back into old patterns just to feel stable again. You will try to reconnect with what your spirit has already outgrown. You will try to push through the exhaustion instead of understanding what it is trying to reveal. But this exhaustion is not asking you to push harder. It is asking you to pay attention. There is also something else happening. Something even more subtle. When your spirit begins to elevate, when your awareness begins to sharpen, you become more sensitive not only to your own energy, but to the energy around you. You begin to notice things you didn't notice before. You begin to feel the weight of environments that once felt normal. You begin to pick up on tension, negativity, and misalignment more quickly. and that sensitivity can drain you, because you are now processing more than you used to. You are filtering more than you used to. You are protecting your energy in ways you never had to before. And until you fully understand how to manage that sensitivity, it can feel overwhelming. This is why certain interactions leave you more tired than they should. This is why being around certain people feels heavier than before. This is why even small things seem to take more out of you than they used to. It is not because you are getting weaker. It is because you are becoming more aware. And awareness changes everything. But here is the deeper truth you need to understand right now. This kind of spiritual exhaustion often comes right before a significant shift. Right before clarity breaks through. Right before direction becomes clear. Right before something in your life begins to change in a way you did not expect. Because before you can move forward, your spirit has to detach from what no longer belongs. Before you can step into something new, something old has to lose its hold on you. And that process is not comfortable. It requires you to sit with uncertainty. It requires you to face what you have been avoiding. It requires you to acknowledge what has been draining you, even if it means making changes that are not easy. But this is not happening to weaken you. This is happening to prepare you. Because June 6th is approaching, and what you are feeling now is not random. It is the signal that something is shifting. It is the signal that your spirit is being positioned. It is the signal that you are being called to become more aware, more aligned, and more intentional about what you carry forward. So do not dismiss this exhaustion. Do not rush to escape it. Listen to it, because within it is the message you need before the shift arrives. Type I understand the shift in the comments if this is resonating with your spirit. Blessing code 333 is now activating within your awareness. As this revelation settles into your spirit, understand that every moment of clarity you receive is not just for you alone. There are others, just like you, standing on the edge of awakening, waiting for a light to reach them in their darkest confusion. When you choose to support this mission through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not giving to a channel. You are sowing into a field of souls that are ready to receive truth. The word declares, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days," and today, that promise speaks directly over your life. I feel led to say this clearly. I am stepping forward in obedience, and as you respond, heaven records your seed as an act of alignment, not obligation. What you release now becomes a river that carries this message to someone who is about to give up but will find strength instead. This is not just support. This is participation in divine movement. So act now, sow with intention, and watch how God multiplies what you place in His hands. There are certain moments in time that carry more weight than others. Days that seem ordinary on the surface, yet hold a deeper significance beneath what the eyes can see. June 6 is one of those moments. It is not just another date passing by on a calendar. It is a checkpoint, a dividing line, a moment where something that has been building quietly begins to reach a point of manifestation. And the reason you've been feeling this exhaustion leading up to it is because your spirit has been sensing the approach of this moment long before your mind became aware of it. Time, as you experience it, feels linear. One day after another, predictable and routine. But in the spiritual sense, time moves differently. There are seasons of stillness, and there are moments of acceleration. There are periods where nothing seems to change, and then there are specific points where everything begins to shift at once. June 6 carries that kind of energy. It is not gradual. It is not subtle. It is a moment where alignment either strengthens or breaks. That is why your spirit hath been restless. because something within you knows that you cannot carry the same weight into this moment. You cannot move forward with the same patterns, the same attachments, the same level of awareness. This state is not asking you to be perfect, but it is demanding that you be conscious, fully aware of what you are holding, what you are allowing, and what you are ignoring. Think about the timing of everything you've been feeling. The sudden exhaustion, a lack of clarity, the emotional heaviness, the sense that something is off, even if you can't explain it. These are not disconnected experiences. They are connected signals. Signals that something has been preparing to surface. Signals that something within your life is reaching a point where it can no longer remain hidden, suppressed, or delayed. June 6th acts as a mirror. It reflects what is aligned and what is not. It reveals what is stable and what has been forced. It exposes what has been building beneath the surface, whether you've been paying attention to it or not. And this is where the urgency comes in. Because moments like this do not wait for you to feel ready. They arrive regardless. They reveal regardless. They shift regardless. The only difference is whether you meet the moment with awareness or whether you are caught off guard by what it brings. You've already felt the early signs. There have been subtle disruptions in your routine. Small things that didn't go as planned. Moments where your patience felt thinner than usual. Times where your energy dropped without warning. Situations that made you question whether something deeper was happening. These were not random inconveniences. They were early indicators. Because before a shift happens externally, it always begins internally. Your spirit begins adjusting first. Your awareness begins shifting first. Your sensitivity increases first. And only then does the outer reality begin to reflect that internal change. You are in that internal phase right now, which is why everything feels unsettled. Because you are being repositioned. And repositioning is not comfortable. It requires you to step out of autopilot. It requires you to stop ignoring what feels misaligned. It requires you to acknowledge where your energy has been going and whether it has been serving you or draining you. June 6th is not creating something new out of nothing. It is activating what has already been building. It is bringing to the surface what has been underneath your awareness. And that is why it feels intense. Because intensity often comes when truth is close to being revealed. There is also something else you need to understand about this moment. It is not just about what is happening around you. It is about what is being required from you. Because when moments like this arrive, they do not just reveal external situations. They also reveal your level of readiness. Your ability to respond instead of react. Your ability to remain grounded instead of overwhelmed. Your ability to see clearly instead of getting lost in confusion. And this is where your exhaustion becomes important, because it has slowed you down enough to notice. If you had been full of energy, moving quickly, distracted by constant activity, you might have missed the signals entirely. But your fatigue forced you to pause. It forced you to become aware. It forced you to recognize that something needed your attention. So what felt like a weakness was actually preparation. Preparation for this moment. Preparation for what June 6th represents. This is not a day to fear, but it is a day to respect. Because it marks a shift that will either bring clarity or create further confusion depending on how you approach it. It will either move you forward or show you exactly what is holding you back. And right now, you are standing right before it. Not by accident, but because you were meant to be aware before it arrives. So do not dismiss what you've been feeling. Do not ignore the signals. Because June 6th is not just approaching. It is calling for your attention. Type "I am ready for this moment" in the comments if you feel the weight of this message. Blessing code 6066 is now lighting your path. There is a reason why your exhaustion feels different this time. It is not just the kind that comes from doing too much or sleeping too little. It is not the kind that fades after rest or disappears after a break. This exhaustion lingers. It follows you into your quiet moments. It sits with you even when nothing is happening. And that is because what you are feeling is not only physical or emotional. It is the effect of something unseen. There is an invisible layer to your life that most people never stop to consider. A layer where energy is exchanged, where influence is subtle, where pressure builds without making a sound. And right now, whether you realize it or not, you have been moving through an environment that has been quietly draining your strength. This is not about fear. This is about awareness. Because not every battle shows itself clearly. Some battles are quiet. They do not come with obvious conflict or dramatic events. Instead, they show up as distraction, as confusion, as sudden lack of motivation, as overthinking, as a constant feeling of being pulled in too many directions at once. You may have noticed how difficult it has been to focus lately, how your thoughts seem more scattered than usual, how even when you try to concentrate, something interrupts your flow. Not always externally, but internally. A thought, a worry, a memory. Something that pulls your attention away and leaves you feeling more drained than before. That is not random. That is part of the invisible pressure you have been under. Because when something significant is approaching in your life, there is often resistance before it arrives. Not always in obvious ways, but in subtle disruptions designed to weaken your clarity and drain your energy before the shift takes place. Think about how many times recently you have felt like doing something important but couldn't bring yourself to start. Or you started, but quickly lost momentum. Or you planned something, but it didn't unfold the way you expected. These small interruptions may seem insignificant on their own, but together they create a pattern of resistance. And resistance has a purpose. It tries to slow you down, not in a way that helps you rest, but in a way that keeps you distracted. It keeps your attention scattered so you don't fully see what is happening. It keeps your energy low so you don't respond with clarity. It keeps you caught in cycles of thinking instead of moving with intention. This is why your exhaustion feels heavier than usual. Because it is not just coming from what you are doing. It is coming from what you are navigating. There are environments you've been in that no longer align with you. Conversations that have taken more from you than they have given. Expectations that have quietly pressured you to be more than you have the energy to be right now. And instead of stepping back, you have been trying to keep up. But your spirit has been resisting. Your spirit has been signaling that something is off, even if your mind has been trying to make sense of it logically. And that internal conflict is exhausting. Because one part of you is trying to maintain normalcy, to keep things the way they've been, while another part of you is pushing for change, for distance, for a different way of moving forward. This is the invisible battle. Not something outside of you attacking you directly, but something within you trying to realign you while everything around you pulls you in the opposite direction. You've also been carrying the weight of unfinished thoughts. Things you haven't fully processed. Decisions you've been postponing. Feelings you've been setting aside because there never seemed to be the right moment to deal with them. But those things don't disappear. They stay active beneath the surface. And over time, they begin to consume energy without you realizing it. They occupy space in your mind. They create subtle tension in your body. They keep your spirit engaged in a constant state of processing, even when you think you are resting. That is why rest hasn't been enough. Because the exhaustion is not just physical depletion. It is energetic overload. Too many open loops. Too many unresolved signals. Too much internal noise. And now, as June 6th approaches, all of that is becoming more noticeable. Because moments of shift have a way of amplifying what has been hidden. They bring everything to the surface. The distractions become clearer. The misalignments become harder to ignore. The things that once felt manageable suddenly feel overwhelming. Not because they have grown stronger, but because your awareness has. You are beginning to see what has been draining you. You are beginning to feel what has been taking more than it gives. You are beginning to recognize that not everything around you deserves your energy. And this realization is the beginning of your strength returning. Because once you see the invisible, it no longer has the same power over you. Once you recognize the patterns, you can step out of them. Once you understand what has been draining you, you can begin to protect your energy instead of constantly losing it. This is not about fighting harder. This is about seeing clearer. Because clarity restores strength faster than effort ever could. And right now, you are being shown exactly what has been affecting you. Not to overwhelm you, but to prepare you. Type ISE clearly now in the comments if this is opening your awareness. Blessing code 555 is now restoring your energy. There are moments when the message becomes clearer, sharper, more direct. Moments when the subtle signs are no longer enough, when the quiet nudges must turn into something unmistakable. This is that moment. Because what you have been feeling is not just a buildup of pressure or a passing phase. It is a signal that has now reached a point where it can no longer remain quiet. And this is where the warning becomes urgent. You have been sensing something, even if you could not name it. A shift in energy. A change in how things feel around you. A growing awareness that something is not aligned the way it used to be. You tried to brush it off. You tried to stay grounded in what felt familiar. But the feeling kept returning, stronger each time, harder to ignore. That is because this is not something meant to be ignored anymore. There is a reason your exhaustion intensified instead of fading. There is a reason your awareness has been increasing instead of settling. There is a reason you feel like you are being pulled to pay attention even when you try to distract yourself. Because right now, you are standing in a moment where your response matters more than ever. And this is the warning. Do not move forward blindly. Do not dismiss what your spirit is showing you. Do not return to what has already shown you that it drains you. There are patterns in your life that have repeated themselves more than once. Situations that seemed different on the surface but carried the same outcome. People, environments, or habits that slowly took more from you than they gave back. You have seen it. You have felt it. And yet, there were moments where you stayed longer than you should have, where you gave more than you had, where you hoped things would change instead of recognizing what they were. But now, that phase is ending. Because awareness without action leads to the same cycle repeating again. And this is what you are being warned about. If you ignore what you are seeing now, if you push aside what you are feeling now, you risk stepping into the same patterns again, but with deeper consequences. Not because you are being punished, but because you are being given a chance to choose differently. You are not the same version of yourself anymore. Your awareness has changed. Your sensitivity has increased. Your understanding of what drains you and what supports you has become clearer. And because of that, the expectations for your choices have also changed. You can no longer pretend not to see what you see. You can no longer tolerate what you know is not right for you. You can no longer carry what you have already recognized as too heavy. This is where the urgency comes from. Because June 6th is not just revealing what has been hidden. It is asking you to respond to it, to make adjustments, to create boundaries, to step back where necessary and step forward where it truly matters. And this is not always easy, because sometimes the things you need to step away from are familiar. They are comfortable in their own way, even if they are draining. They are connected to routines, to relationships, to parts of your life that you have invested time and energy into. But comfort does not always mean alignment, and familiarity does not always mean it belongs in your future. This is the moment where clarity must become action, where awareness must turn into decision, where you stop negotiating with what you already know is not serving you. Because every moment you delay, every time you ignore the signal, your energy continues to be drained by the same sources. And that is what must stop now. You are not being asked to do everything at once. You are not being asked to make drastic changes without thought. But you are being asked to acknowledge the truth of what you are experiencing and to stop moving against your own awareness. Listen to how your body reacts to certain situation. Notice how your energy shifts around certain people. Pay attention to what leaves you feeling lighter and what leaves you feeling heavier. These are not random reactions. They are guidance. And right now, that guidance is becoming stronger because the moment requires it. You are being positioned to move forward with more clarity, more intention, and more control over where your energy goes. But that can only happen if you take this warning seriously. Not as something to fear, but as something to respect. Because ignoring it will not make it go away. It will only delay what you already know needs to happen. And the longer it is delayed, the heavier it becomes. This is your moment to shift that. To stop repeating what you have outgrown. To stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. To step into a position where your energy is protected, your awareness is honored, and your direction becomes clearer. This is not about reacting. This is about responding with intention. And the choice is now in front of you. Type "I choose differently" in the comments if you are ready to act on this awareness. Blessing code 6666 is now strengthening your discernment. There have been moments, subtle but undeniable, where something inside you paused, where your intuition whispered, where your body reacted before your mind could explain why. Those moments were not random. They were not overreactions. They were signals. And if you look back honestly, you will realize that the signs have been there for a while now. You just didn't fully trust them. There were times when something didn't feel right, but you told yourself you were overthinking. Times when your energy shifted around a person or situation, but you convinced yourself to ignore it. Times when you felt the urge to step back, to say no, to take distance, but instead you stayed, you engaged, you pushed through. And every time you did that, something inside you became quieter. Not gone, but quieter. Because your awareness was speaking, but your logic was overriding it. Your intuition was guiding, but your habits were keeping you in place. And slowly, without realizing it, you began to disconnect from your own signals. But they never stopped. They showed up in small ways at first. A feeling of hesitation before saying yes. A moment of discomfort in the middle of a conversation. A sense of heaviness after certain interaction. A lack of excitement for things that once felt natural to you. These were not coincidences. They were early warnings. Because your spirit recognizes misalignment before your mind can process it. It senses what drains you before you consciously admit it. It feels what is off before you have the evidence to explain it. And instead of trusting that, you questioned it. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You tried to be understanding. You told yourself things would improve, that maybe you were just tired, that maybe it wasn't as serious as it felt. But the pattern continued, and the signs became stronger. You started noticing repeated cycles, the same outcomes in different situations, the same emotional drain, even when the context changed, the same feeling of giving more than you were receiving, the same sense of imbalance that never quite resolved itself. At that point, it was no longer a single moment. It was a pattern, and patterns are not accidents. They are indicators. Indicators that something is not aligned the way it should be. Indicators that something needs your attention. Indicators that continuing in the same way will lead to the same results. But even then, part of you hesitated, because recognizing the pattern means accepting what it implies. It means admitting that something needs to change. It means stepping out of what is familiar, even if it is not ideal. And that is not always easy. So you stayed a little longer. You waited a little more. You hoped for a shift without making one yourself. But now, everything feels louder. The signs are no longer subtle. The exhaustion is no longer manageable. The awareness is no longer something you can push aside. Because when signals are ignored long enough, they intensify. Not to punish you, but to reach you. And that is where you are now. You are in a moment where what you once ignored is now undeniable. Where what you once questioned is now clear. Where what you once tolerated is now draining you faster than you can recover. This is not a coincidence. This is the accumulation of everything your spirit has been trying to show you. And now, you are finally seeing it. You are starting to recognize which situations leave you feeling heavy, which interactions leave you feeling depleted, which environments no longer support who you are becoming. You are noticing the difference between what feels right and what simply feels familiar. And that distinction is everything. Because familiarity can keep you stuck, but awareness moves you forward. You are also beginning to realize that not every opportunity is meant for you. Not every connection is meant to continue. Not every path you started is meant to be finished in the same way you imagine. And that realization can feel uncomfortable, because it challenges what you've been used to. It asks you to reassess what you've accepted. It invites you to make choices that align with your current awareness, not your past habits. But this is exactly what this moment requires. Because June 6th is not just about what is coming. It is about what you now see clearly. And once you see clearly, you cannot go back to not seeing. That is why the signs matter. That is why they kept appearing. That is why they became stronger over time. Because they were guiding you to this point of awareness. A point where you can no longer ignore what you know. A point where you can no longer pretend that everything is fine when you feel otherwise. A point where your next step must reflect what you have learned, not what you have been comfortable with. You were not wrong for taking time to understand. You were not wrong for giving space for things to change. But now, you have reached the moment where clarity has replaced confusion. And with clarity comes responsibility. The responsibility to act on what you see. The responsibility to protect your energy. The responsibility to choose alignment over familiarity. And that is where your strength truly begins to return. Not when everything changes around you, but when you begin to respond differently within yourself. Type "I trust my awareness" in the comments if you recognize these signs now. Blessing code 777 is now strengthening your intuition. Something is building, and you can feel it even if you cannot fully explain it. It is not loud yet, not fully visible, but it is present. It is in the way your energy has been fluctuating. It is in the way your awareness has been sharpening. It is in the way certain things no longer feel the same, even though nothing on the surface seems to have changed. This is what happens right before a shift. A shift does not arrive suddenly without warning. It sends signals ahead of time. It creates pressure. It creates discomfort. It creates a sense of restlessness that does not go away, no matter how much you try to settle into normal routines. And what you have been feeling lately is exactly that. The early movement of something preparing to change your direction, your clarity, and your circumstances. But here is what you need to understand clearly. Not every shift feels positive in the beginning. Not every change arrives with ease and comfort. Sometimes a shift feels like disruption before it feels like alignment. It feels like things are falling apart before they begin to come together in a different way. And if you are not aware of this, you may misinterpret what is happening. You may think things are getting worse. You may think you are losing control. You may think something is going wrong. But what if what you are feeling is not things falling apart, but things being rearranged? Because that is what this moment is about. There are areas in your life that have been held together by habit, by routine, by familiarity, not by true alignment. And when a shift approaches, those areas begin to weaken. They begin to feel unstable. They begin to demand your attention in a way they did not before. That is why certain situations have started to feel more intense. That is why certain emotions have become harder to ignore. That is why your tolerance for what drains you has decreased. Because the shift does not allow you to remain where you are while expecting something different. It forces movement. It forces recognition. It forces decision. And this is where most people become uncomfortable. Because change requires letting go of control over what you are used to. It requires stepping into uncertainty without having every answer. It requires trusting what you feel, even when you cannot fully see the outcome yet. And this is where your exhaustion plays a role again. Because it has slowed you down enough to realize that continuing in the same way is not sustainable. It has made it clear that something has to change, even if you do not yet know exactly what that change will look like. The shift that is coming is not random. It is connected to everything you have been feeling, everything you have been noticing, everything you have been slowly becoming aware of. It is the response to all of that. It is the moment where what has been building internally begins to express itself externally. This could show up in different ways. A realization that becomes impossible to ignore. A situation that reaches a point where it demands a decision. A conversation that brings clarity you did not expect. A change in direction that you did not plan but subtly understand. It may not arrive in the exact form you imagine, but it will arrive in a way that makes it clear that something has shifted. And when it does, your reaction matters. Because you will have a choice. You can resist it. Try to hold on to what feels familiar. Try to delay the change. Try to maintain what no longer feels right. Or you can accept it, move with it, allow it to guide you toward something that aligns more with who you are becoming. This is not about forcing anything. This is about recognizing what is already unfolding. The shift is not asking you to create something out of nothing. It is asking you to respond to what is already happening. And that is why your awareness right now is so important. Because if you stay aware, you will recognize the moment when the shift begins to show itself. You will notice the difference. You will feel the change. You will understand that what once felt confusing now begins to make sense. But if you stay distracted, if you ignore the signals, if you keep moving on autopilot, you may miss the clarity that comes with it. And that is what this moment is trying to prevent. You have been prepared for this. Through the exhaustion, through the awareness, through the signs you almost ignored. All of it had been leading to this point. A point where something changes. A point where you step into a different level of clarity. A point where what felt uncertain begins to reveal its direction. This is not the end of something. It is the beginning of a different phase. But you have to be present to recognize it. Type "I accept" the shift in the comments if you are ready for what is coming. Blessing code 8888 is now activating alignment in your path. As this shift begins to unfold within you, understand that what you are receiving right now is not meant to stop with you. There are others standing in the same confusion, the same exhaustion, waiting for a message like this to reach them at the right moment. When you choose to support this mission through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description, you are not just giving, you are planting seeds into lives that are ready for awakening. The word speaks, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy," and this is not just a verse, it is a living promise being activated through your obedience. I am stepping into this moment with intention, and as you respond, your action becomes part of something greater than yourself. What you release now becomes a channel through which clarity flows to someone else who desperately needs it. This is your moment to act. Not later, not someday, but now. Sow with purpose, and watch how what you give returns to you multiplied in ways you did not expect. There comes a point in every transition where holding on becomes heavier than letting go. A point where what once felt manageable starts to feel unbearable. Not because it suddenly changed, but because you did. And right now, you are standing at that exact point. The exhaustion you've been feeling is not just from what you've been carrying, it is from what you were never meant to carry this far. There are things in your life that have already expired, but you have kept them alive through habit, through attachment, through the hope that they might still become what you once believed they could be. And now, as June 6th approaches, that weight is becoming undeniable. Because this moment does not allow you to move forward while still holding on to what is pulling you backward. You already know what it is. You felt it while listening to everything up to this point. That quiet realization that came to you. That one thing, or maybe a few things, that instantly came to mind. The situation that drains you every time you think about it. The connection that feels heavier than it feels supportive. The expectation you've been trying to meet, even though it no longer aligns with who you are becoming. You recognized it, and that recognition is not random. Because before anything shifts externally, there is always something that must be released internally. Something that has to loosen its hold on you so that you can move freely into what is coming next. And if you try to carry both at the same time, the old and the new, you will feel exactly what you've been feeling now. Overwhelmed. Drained. Stuck in between. This is the cost of holding on too long. You've been giving energy to things that no longer return it. You've been investing your attention into places that do not support your growth. You've been holding on to versions of people, situations, or even parts of yourself that no longer exist in the way they used to. And the hardest part is you know it. You've known it for a while. But letting go requires a decision, not a gradual realization, not a passive awareness, a decision. And decisions come with discomfort. Because releasing something means accepting that it will not continue in the same way. It means stepping into uncertainty. It means trusting that what you are making space for is more aligned than what you are leaving behind. But this is where clarity must guide you. Because holding on is not neutral. It is costing you energy. It is costing you focus. It is costing you the ability to fully step into what is trying to come into your life. And that is why this moment feels urgent. Not because you are running out of time in a dramatic sense, but because the longer you hold on to what no longer serves you, the more resistance you create against the shift that is trying to happen. There are emotional attachments you need to release. Thoughts that you keep replaying that no longer serve a purpose. Expectations that were built on a version of reality that has already changed. You have been carrying these things out of habit, out of familiarity, out of a sense of responsibility that may no longer be yours to carry. And it is exhausting you, because your spirit is ready to move forward, but your attachment is keeping you in place. This is where you have to be honest with yourself, not about what you wish things could be, but about what they actually are. Because clarity does not come from holding on to possibilities. It comes from accepting reality. And once you accept it, the next step becomes clearer. You do not need to force the release all at once. You do not need to create a dramatic change overnight. But you do need to stop feeding what you know is draining you. You need to stop giving energy to what you have already recognized as misaligned. That is where release begins. Not in a single moment, but in a shift of direction. In choosing not to engage the same way. In choosing not to invest the same energy. In choosing to create distance where you once stayed too close. Because every small decision you make in that direction begins to restore your energy. It begins to create space. And that space is necessary. Because what is coming next requires room. It requires clarity. It requires you to be lighter, not heavier. And right now, you are being asked to prepare for that. This is not about loss. This is about alignment. It is about making sure that what you carry forward actually belongs in your future. Because not everything that was once part of your life is meant to continue with you. Some things were only meant to teach you. Some things were only meant to shape you. And once they have done that, their role is complete. Holding on to them beyond that point does not add value. It only adds weight. And that weight is what you have been feeling. So this is your moment to begin releasing it. Not out of fear, but out of awareness. Because once you release what is no longer meant for you, you will finally feel the shift you've been preparing for. Type ILET GO now in the comments if you are ready to release what no longer serves you. Blessing code 999 is now lifting the weight from your spirit. Here is something you have been resisting without even realizing it. Not a person, not a situation, not a responsibility, but a state. A state that feels unfamiliar because you have spent so much time doing, pushing, responding, and carrying. That state is stillness. And right now, more than anything else, stillness is what you have been called into, even if it feels uncomfortable. Because when everything around you feels uncertain, when your energy feels low, when your direction feels unclear, the instinct is to do more, to figure it out faster, to push harder, to force clarity, to move in any direction just to escape the feeling of being stuck. But what if the very thing you are trying to escape is the place where your clarity is waiting? This is the part that most people misunderstand. Stillness is not stagnation. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is not falling behind. Stillness is where everything becomes visible. Because when you stop moving constantly, when you stop reacting to every thought, every feeling, every external demand, something begins to settle. The noise starts to fade. The pressure begins to ease. And what hath been hidden beneath all that movement starts to come into focus. That is why stillness can feel uncomfortable at first. Because it removes distraction. It removes the constant activity that kept you from fully feeling what has been building inside you. It removes the urgency to act before you understand. And in that space, you are left with your thoughts, your awareness, your truth. And that can feel intense. But it is also where your strength is restored. because the exhaustion you have been feeling did not come from stillness. It came from constant output without enough internal clarity. It came from responding without fully understanding what you were responding to. It came from moving forward while parts of you were still trying to catch up. And now, your system is asking for a reset. Not through more effort, but through intentional pause. There have been moments recently where you felt the need to withdraw, to step back, to not engage as much as you normally would. Moments where you wanted quiet, even if you didn't know what you would do with it. That was not avoidance. That was instinct. That was your inner awareness guiding you toward stillness. Because stillness allows you to separate what is yours from what is not. It allows you to recognize which thoughts are worth your energy and which are just noise. It allows you to observe patterns instead of being caught in them. It allows you to respond with intention instead of reacting automatically. And this is exactly what you need right now. Because the shift that is coming requires clarity. And clarity does not come from constant movement. It comes from stillness. There is also something else that happens when you allow yourself to be still. Your energy begins to return. Not all at once, but gradually. Because you are no longer spending it on things that do not require your attention. You are no longer reacting to every external trigger. You are no longer carrying the weight of constant engagement. You begin to conserve your energy instead of constantly releasing it. And that changes everything. Because when your energy is restored, your perspective shifts. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel manageable. What once felt confusing begins to make sense. What once felt urgent no longer demands the same reaction. You begin to see clearly, and that clarity gives you control. Control over your decisions. Control over where your attention goes. Control over how you respond to what is happening around you. This is the power hidden in stillness. It does not force answers. It reveals them. It does not push you forward blindly. It aligns you before you move. And right now, this is exactly what you are being guided into. Not to stop completely. Not to disconnect from everything. But to become intentional about when you engage and when you pause. To give yourself the space to process what you have been experiencing instead of constantly moving past it. To allow your awareness to fully develop instead of rushing to act before you understand. Because once you do that, everything begins to shift. Not because your external circumstances change immediately, but because your internal state becomes stronger, clearer, and more grounded. And from that place, every decision you make becomes more aligned. This is not something to rush. This is something to respect. Because stillness is not taking you away from your path. It is bringing you closer to it. Type "I embrace stillness" in the comments if you are ready to step into this space. Blessing code 1010 is now restoring your inner balance. Now that you have felt it, recognized it, and begun to understand it, there is one thing you can no longer avoid. Your role in all of this. Because everything you have experienced up to this point, the exhaustion, the awareness, the signs, the pressure, the stillness, none of it was random. It was all preparing you for this realization. You are not just observing this shift. You are part of it. And this is where everything becomes more real, more personal, and more important. Because it is one thing to recognize that something is changing. It is another thing to understand that your response to that change will determine what happens next. This is not about waiting for something to happen to you. This is about how you choose to move with what is already happening around you. Because right now, you are standing in a moment where your awareness has increased. You see things more clearly than you did before. You feel things more deeply than you used to. You recognize patterns, energy, and misalignment in a way that you could not ignore it even if you tried. And that awareness comes with responsibility. Not pressure, not fear, but responsibility. The responsibility to act in alignment with what you now know. Because once you are aware, you cannot go back to acting the same way without feeling the consequences more strongly. You cannot pretend not to see what you see. You cannot continue to engage in what drains you without feeling it immediately. And that is intentional. Because you are being guided to move differently. To respond instead of react. To choose instead of fall into habit. To become intentional instead of automatic. This is your role. Not to control everything. Not to predict every outcome. But to stay aware and respond in a way that aligns with your growth. There will be moments very soon where this becomes real in your daily life. Situations that test whether you truly understood what you have been feeling. Moments where you will have to decide whether to engage or step back. Whether to speak or remain silent. Whether to hold on or let go. And those moments may not feel dramatic. They may feel small. But they are significant. Because small decisions create direction. And direction determines outcome. This is where many people miss their moment. Not because they did not feel the shift. Not because they were not aware. But because when the moment came to act, they returned to what was familiar instead of what was aligned. They chose comfort over clarity. They chose habit over awareness. They chose temporary ease over long-term alignment. And that is what kept them in the same cycle. But you are being given a different opportunity. Because you have already recognized what needs to change. You have already felt what drains you. You have already seen what no longer fits in your life. Now, your role is to honor that awareness. To make choices that reflect it. Even when it feels uncomfortable. Even when it requires you to move differently than before. Even when it means disappointing expectations that were built on the old version of you. Because the truth is, your path forward cannot look the same as your path before. It cannot be built on the same patterns, the same decisions, the same reactions. It requires a shift in how you show up. And that shift starts with you. Not with everything around you changing first. But with you responding differently to what is already there. This is where your power is. Not in controlling every situation, but in choosing how you move through it. Because when you change your response, you change the outcome. When you change your awareness, you change your direction. When you stop repeating what you have outgrown, you create space for something new to enter. And that is exactly what this moment is leading toward. You are not being left to figure this out alone. Everything you have felt up to this point has been guiding you here, preparing you to recognize the difference between what aligns and what does not, preparing you to trust your awareness instead of ignoring it, preparing you to step into a version of yourself that moves with intention, clarity, and control over your energy. This is your role. To stay aware. To stay intentional. To stay aligned with what you now understand. Because what comes next will respond to how you show up now. And you are ready for that. Type "I step into my role" in the comments if you are ready to move with intention. Blessing code 1111 is now activating your path forward. This is the moment where everything comes together. Not in a loud, overwhelming way, but in a clear, undeniable realization that you are standing at a point of decision. Everything you have felt, everything you have recognized, everything you have been guided through up to this point has been leading you here. Because moments like this do not stay open forever. They appear, they reveal, and then they pass. And what determines whether they transform you or simply pass you by is how you respond while you are in them. Right now you are aware. You are not in the same place you were before you heard this message. You are not looking at your exhaustion the same way. You are not dismissing your awareness the same way. You are not ignoring the signals the same way. Something has shifted in how you see things, and that shift is the opening. But an opening only matters if you move through it, because it is possible to recognize everything and still hesitate. It is possible to feel the truth and still delay action. It is possible to understand what needs to change and still fall back into what is familiar. And that is why this is the final call. Not a call to rush, not a call to panic, but a call to decide. To decide that you will not go back to ignoring what drains you. To decide that you will not carry what you have already recognized as too heavy. To decide that you will not continue in patterns that you have already outgrown. Because if you do, the exhaustion will return. Not as a warning next time, but as a consequence of staying where you already knew you should not remain. This is what makes this moment important, because you have been given clarity before continuation. You have been shown what needs to shift before you are asked to move forward. You have been slowed down long enough to see clearly before the pace picks up again. And now, the choice is yours. Not tomorrow. Not eventually. Now, because what you chose in this moment sets the direction for what comes next. If you choose awareness, you move forward with clarity. If you choose alignment, you move forward with strength. If you choose to release what no longer serves you, you create space for something better to enter. But if you choose to ignore this, to push it aside, to return to autopilot, you return to the same cycle that brought you here. And you already know how that feels. That is what your exhaustion has been showing you. Not to discourage you, but to wake you up. To make sure you do not miss this window. Because this window is not just about June 6th as a date. It is about a moment of awareness that you are in right now. A moment where you see clearly enough to choose differently. A moment where you feel strongly enough to act intentionally. A moment where you are aligned enough to step forward without carrying the same weight. And this moment matters more than you realize. Because the next phase of your life will not be built on what you were before this. It will be built on what you choose now. So do not underestimate this. Do not delay this. Do not convince yourself that you will deal with it later. Because later turns into the same cycle repeating again. And you are not meant to repeat this. You are meant to move forward. Lighter. Clearer. More aware. More intentional. This is your final call to step into that. Type "I step forward now" in the comments if you are choosing to move with clarity. Blessing code 1212 is now sealing this shift within you. As you step forward from this moment, understand this truth deeply. What awakened in you today is meant to reach others who are still lost in their exhaustion, still searching for clarity in their confusion. Every seed you release through Super Thanks or through the PayPal link in the description becomes a light placed in someone else's darkness, guiding them to this same awakening. The word declares, those who bring light to others will themselves be filled with light. And right now, that promise is being spoken directly over you. I am stepping into this mission with obedience, and as you respond, you are not just giving, you are activating a flow that carries truth into lives that are ready to receive it. Your action in this moment is not small. It is prophetic. It is timely. And it is aligned with something greater than what you can see. Do not wait for another moment. Do not hesitate in this calling. So now, act now, and watch how what you release returns to you multiplied in clarity, strength, and divine alignment.